Another shortcut we can use for connection with the present moment is using our self-talk again. So we've talked about compassionate self-talk, and we've talked about labeling and noticing and naming emotions, and we're really using the prefrontal cortex to help regulate the limbic system of the brain, although that's a simplified model. In a way, that's part of what's happening there. And we know from the research that actually this can be one of the best ways to help regulate emotions to some degree, so to take the edge off them. So they get people with arachnophobia to approach spiders. Obviously the stress response goes up, and that's one way they measure emotional reactions and emotional regulation. And they found that actually just narrating and labeling what was going on lowered the emotional response the most, actually, in one of the studies, or a number of studies. So this affective labeling or emotional labeling is such a useful tool, and something that you find in traditional Buddhism that preceded mindfulness. So you have Mahasi noting, and it's also found in Tibetan Buddhism and other places. You have this labeling and noting, and in Zen as well, and it can be just a tool to help us get there. ACT use it a lot, so Stephen Hayes talks about this a lot, and Russ Harris, and throughout all the different bits of ACT literature you'll find a lot on emotional labeling, and it's a really helpful tool to help us in the present moment if we're hooked. And we can also use this narration to help us to concentrate and be focused in the moment. And Russ Harris talks about this in The Happiness Trap. Factual description, so to use a factual description of what's going on in the moment rather than excessive judgment and critical judgment. Not to say we can't discern things and use that kind of judgment, but it's the excessive judgment. So the factual description when we are feeling distracted. So I think the writer A.J. Jacobs talked about this, that actually it's a shortcut to mindfulness almost, is narrating what's going on. And you find this in the police service. So they will do this approach when they're driving to help them stay focused and concentrating when driving. So they'll do narration whilst driving. So they'll say, check mirrors, turning right, this kind of thing. And it can all help us to not get distracted, not go into autopilot. And it's not dissimilar to checklists that you see in pilots. So they'll never just rely on their mind. They'll go through a checklist to make sure they're remembering everything. And we see it in lots of areas in life. So sports people will often use it. They'll use self-talk in a motivational way or an instructional way. If you talk to any top athletes, generally, obviously there'll be exceptions, but most of them are using self-talk to either help with motivation or instructional to keep focused. And they've done studies that people can be more accurate at shooting basketball hoops using instructional self-talk. And so we can use this skill to help us in our life. Some of this is the labeling the difficult emotions that are coming up. So, okay, I notice I'm feeling some anxiety here. I have some butterflies in my stomach, some tightness in my chest, and my heart rate is beating. Okay, what do I need to do next? And then we can reflect on our value. Okay, is this next activity going to be a value-based activity? And yes, it is. Okay, I do care about whatever I'm going to do next. I'm going to go and walk in the park. That is a value-based activity for me. So we can narrate the emotion, what's going on, what's happening around us, and the choices we're making. And this can be so helpful with depression when we're very deactivated, actually talking ourselves through even simple things like getting out of bed and making breakfast. It can be so helpful with concentration to use this self-talk and this narration, so this factual description. So it might be something to practice, especially when you're distracted, when you're really caught in your head, really ruminating, or you're losing contact with the present moment, to be factual. So, factual will help us when we say we do something that's a so-called mistake. So we very simple example, we drop something or we knock something over. Okay, I've knocked something over here. What do I need to do to pick this up? Okay, I'm a bit tired. That's probably what caused that, rather than the judgment, which is, oh, you just did something really stupid. What are you doing? Bleep, 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 etc. So trying to work on this factual description and labeling can be a useful way to connect with the present moment. So give it a try and see if it's helpful. It won't help everyone. Some people don't want to go near this aspect, and self-talk isn't so helpful. And as we've said in videos, we've all got very different brains, and the most important thing is having your own agency and tailoring what you do to yourself. So any of the tools that we talk about in these videos, make them your own. Try them out, test them in different ways, compare them against what your aims and objectives are. And then if they help and they support, then use them and practice them. And if they don't, keep trying different techniques. So this factual narrating is something you do in your mind silently and softly. Of course, if you're in your own home, you can actually do it out loud, and that can be even more helpful if we're really distracted. So we've talked about before, when we're really depressed, it's hard to even think, in that state. You can be so shut down. And same with anxiety, your mind can be so blank. People talk about blank mind, and our ability to think is being affected by these difficult states, and we're going into this freeze response. So to use some narrating can be so helpful with that, either in our mind or out loud if we're in the right place. And actually, you'll see people do this anyway. I had a workman actually who was doing some work on our house, and all day long he was narrating what he was doing. He was talking through what the next step was, what he needed to do, and his work was fantastic, was excellent. So he was using this skill very intuitively just to focus and be engaged and to do what he needed to do next. So it can be so helpful when we're in that shut down state. And we do it just kindly, gently inside, like an encouraging, motivating coach, helping us stay on task, helping us stay in the present moment, helping us do activities that are supportive. And this narration can also help with savoring and enjoying stuff. We talked about this on the savoring video, that actually just gently narrating in your mind what you're enjoying and what's happening, and how you feel, and the pleasantness and the openness and the engagement and enjoyment can be really helpful for some people. Not for everyone. Some people prefer just the senses and just connecting with that, but try it out. And you might even notice in your own brain, often when people are really enjoying something, if you check your self-talk, it's going, this is amazing, I am loving this, this feels brilliant, okay, what am I going to do next? I love this. So sometimes to use that self-talk the other way around to help us connect and to bring attention to the very subtle joy. So often the problem in mental health challenges is that we have these really big, painful, difficult emotions that just hijack our attention, and alongside that we have these very subtle pleasant emotions that are not so easy to notice in that state. It's different when we're calm and happy and engaged in life. And so there's a bit of a mismatch there. So what we need to do is bring more acceptance to the large emotion, and then bring more attention to the small, pleasant emotion and amplify it. And the self-talk can help with this. So the self-talk to the negative emotion to bring acceptance and noting and labeling, and then to the small, pleasant, little emotions to bring gratitude and savoring and to amplify them. And then we can balance that out. We can be better at accepting, holding, and not being so impacted by the negative, and then bring more and more fulfillment to the positive and actually boost them up so they're very strong, powerful feelings. And you see this in traditional meditation. They have jhana practice where you focus on a pleasant emotion You start, you get concentrated, and then you focus on a little bit of pleasantness, and it just amplifies and grows, and you can get into these very blissful, wonderful states just from this tiny little flicker of positive emotion. So we can use a similar thing in life, and the less judging we do, the better. So the more we're not comparing and thinking about how much we enjoyed the present moment in the past or how engaged we were, the better. So every time we notice that judging, we can name it judging, come back, or we can just notice and come back, and reduce how much we engage with that judgment in our mind and how much we feed it and add to it.